I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Pour It Over, and former poet laureate Joy Harjo is here, and she is one of my absolute favorite poets working today. All of it, the memoirs, the music, the poetry, it is all just a delight. There's a new book called Girl Warrior, which actually straddles the
Yes.
line, I think, between memoir and poetry, and also just a little bit of advice. And I mean, Joy, you are a great grandmother now, which every time I think about
Yeah,
that, I'm like,
that's
how is that possible? Um, but I'm delighted that you're here, and I'm delighted that Girl Warrior is out. And I'm wondering if you could just let folks know how this book came to be.
yeah, that what really set off the intention for that book was I travel a lot in
Mm-hmm.
my work as a poet and a musician, and I meet young people
Mm-hmm.
all over the country and the world. And I love visiting with them, talking with them, and seeing what's going on and what
Right.
these next generations are bringing, because that's the shape of the world. And I wrote it for them.
I love that.
I decided, I've got a few stories. I mean, now I can think of more I can add, but a few stories that might be helpful. I wanted it to be helpful and let them know that, they're going to go through stuff, but that's why we're here. And yeah, and inspire them, and yet give them maybe a little bit of guidance, even though sometimes they feel like they don't want to ask for it, or maybe older people don't have anything to say to them. But I offer it. It's a kind of offering to them for their lives, because they're coming of age in a in really difficult and strange times. And I think, well, maybe every generation has said that, but really, there are so many levels of challenge going on right now. So
Mm-hmm.
many levels that didn't even exist, like when I was,
True.
yeah, when you look at digital and AI and all of the levels that didn't even exist when I was coming of age, or my generation is coming of age.
Well, and also when I think about it too, you really found poetry in the early 70s, and the early 70s were a really turbulent time
Yes.
in American history, especially in the indigenous community. I mean, in all communities of color, but the indigenous community especially was in a real pivot point in a lot
True.
of ways, culturally and socially, financially. I mean, a lot was happening. And you're in the thick of it. And originally you'd said, well, I didn't really think I was going to become a writer.
Right.
I knew I wanted to be an artist. And because you'd had sort of artists in your orbit, but you didn't know any poets, you didn't know any writers, and you were thinking, oh, well, here's the thing. But then you needed to find a voice. And that's exactly how you describe it. And I love the idea that Girl Warrior could help a new generation find their voice. And maybe that is writing, and maybe it's music, and maybe it's visual art. I mean, you do all of these things. And I love the idea that there's a parallel track between the 70s and this very turbulent period, because everyone sort of remembers the 60s, right? And Vietnam and all of this, but no one really remembers that the 70s were still really complicated. It didn't suddenly all disappear and change overnight, kind of thing. And so the idea that art got you through,
Yes.
I think, is really important. Did you write this in a fashion though? Because I feel like there are pieces that you've pulled out from earlier poetry collections. The poem about Rabbit creating the world.
Yeah,
I
I
love that.
pulled
I
that
love
out.
that poem. I love that poem so much. But the way that all of the pieces fit together, and it is slightly chronological to your life, but it's not at the same time. And I'm wondering if we can spend some time on structure.
Wow. Yeah, that one, the structure. Yeah, it's not necessarily chronological,
Mm,
but I do start out with a dream,
yeah.
because I think that, we are dreamers. We are, you think about what dreams are, they're really metaphorical constructs that
Hmm.
kind of show us what our
Hmm.
not thinking logical mind is up to. And that's important. And if you look at the arts, I mean, they're metaphorical expressions, but maybe
Yeah.
humans are metaphorical expressions of something somewhere else, in the matrix,
Hmm.
in the matrix, so to speak. And so that was how I started it off. And then working with young people. That's one of my
Hmm.
favorite histories. working with young people and dealing with some of what they were going through and what we were all going through. And you're right, I hadn't thought of that, but I came of age in kind of the late 60s. I went to
Right.
Indian school, Indian
Yep.
boarding school, and art school. It was an
Mm-hmm.
experiment in Indian education, and it changed me in a way. It saved my life, literally,
Yeah.
and to be around young Native artists from all over the country. And of course, at that age, you think you know everything, but still we were aware that we were carrying something that was needed in those turbulent times of, the Alcatraz takeover, calling
Yep.
attention in a national way, in a way that hadn't been done quite that way
Mm-hmm.
before, to Native rights and personhood, just like, inspired by civil rights movement and so on. And so my writing came out of, I took off. I was a teenage mother. That's why I'm a great grandmother now. My daughter was a teenage mother too, and I guess her daughter, the one with my great grandsons, also. But there's something. I guess what it does is give perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But my writing came out of, I'm within like 6 or 9 hours of a studio art degree, and I started painting again. I finished a painting, started another one for the first time in 50 years. It's for the cover of
Oh.
my album coming out from Folkways.
Okay, that's very cool. That is
Yeah,
very, very cool.
so that's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But writing, to me, I loved reading. I would check out the maximum amount of books I could every week
Mm-hmm.
at the local public library, which was really a little shop in a one of those little strip mall, a little, not a big strip mall, about
Mm-hmm.
a half a block of strip mall that included probably a hairdresser and a five and dime store. And I would check out the books. I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
I love poetry too. It's my mother's songwriting, and she liked
Yeah.
poetry. But it was when I started. It was at Indian school too, when we were talking about who we were as Native peoples and of particular tribal groups, and what we
Mm-hmm.
were doing with our art. And then going to the University of New Mexico and started hearing all these, not just Native poets, the African American, Asian. I mean, there was this confluence
Mm-hmm.
of a multicultural American literature and art, and which of course, but that had never really been seen or proposed,
Right.
especially in the American imagination or the
Mm-hmm.
academic world.
Right.
It was new, and I was around poet, and then I started being around Native poets, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that, and that's what set it off for me.
But you also pull from your mother introduced you to William Blake. Emily
Hmm.
Dickinson was a poet you loved too. I mean, and then obviously Leslie Marmon Silko and James Welch, and you're pulling from so many different points and places. And to me, that speaks to the language and also the experience. But one of the things you've always covered in the poetry, one of the themes that has always been big in your poetry, is this idea that justice is possible, but
Hmm.
we have to work for it and we have to look for it. And so to have that in such beautiful language and to have that sort of laser focus on knowing why you want the poems to exist, right? You're connecting with the people who came before you and you're connecting with the people who are with you now and you are hoping to connect with people in the future. But I'm wondering, why write Girl Warrior as prose and not as a collection of poems and song lyrics?
Well, prose it's different. It's different.
Yeah.
They're little stories, and
Yeah.
I just wanted little stories, and a lot of them are like the stories I tell in between poetry. When I get up and speak, or even doing music, even
Mm-hmm.
performing music, and some of it, a lot of it's around the poetry with
Yeah.
music, with the sax and everything.
Yep.
I always tell stories, and a lot of these, not all of them, but several are little stories that come up, and so it's all part of the performance. And narrative, does something different. There's ways you can speak in
Mm-hmm.
narrative that you cannot in poetry. If I it's just it I needed it in the little story form versus poetry.
There's a great concept in Girl Warrior early in the book where you're talking about the story field. And I
Hmm.
love this image. And it makes It makes so much sense. But the idea that all of these stories that you're telling feed into stories that came before, that will happen in the future, kind of thing. Can we spend some time on this concept of the story field and how it sort of flows in and out of your work even now?
Well, it's like there's resonances,
Yeah.
and there's resonances, and there's what do you call it? Spectrum. That's the word I
Hmm.
keep forgetting. Keep forgetting to say. And you could even say that there's an ancestor spectrum.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down. I was
Hmm.
there's
That's a great line.
an ancestor spectrum, so that they move out, and some are more resonant with you, and there are some ancestors who just
Hmm.
cause trouble. Yeah, that's why I always say I wouldn't say call in all my ancestors, because you don't want everybody in there. I mean,
Right.
it's like here. I mean, that's the thing. It's the same thing. Even with plants, even with animals, it's resonances. And so the story field is sort of, there's so many levels to it.
Hmm.
We're making stories, but
Hmm.
where there's an origin point of a story, and it could be in our dreaming, it could be, and where does our dreaming come from? It could be from the plants, it could be, in
Hmm.
the area you're in, it could be your neighbor, or even I talk about how a donut was a thought that was not mine in the book. There's that goes on, but it's a lively place that we're all part of.
Hmm.
And I know when you're young, you like to think, that you're often so singular in your thinking. And we all were and sometimes are, but and this culture promotes that. This what called Western American culture,
Mm.
really promoted that. And maybe even my generation was part of that too. Free love, and I'll do what I want. Yet we want to change society.
Right.
And I think one thing that my generation has learned, at least natives, is that we have to embody justice. You can't go out and ask somebody for it.
Right.
And that's true, I think, you have to embody it, which is good to remember right now, especially
Hmm.
because if we all embody it, I think then it lines up energetically. It can line up so that justice stands and says, "Oh, here I am, and here, you know, Here's the place. I live here." Because everyone is lined up, so to speak, in their thinking and their love. And love is
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's not gravity, but love, is what it's not glue, but it's that's not the right
It
word.
keeps us grounded in a way. I mean, it
Yeah,
does keep us grounded. You've lived in so many different places, including Hawaii.
yeah,
And I do feel like, though, the work has been always really place is absolutely part of your work and has always been part of your work. But when I say place, I don't mean necessarily specifically one place on a map, but that
right.
you carry place with you. And place for you is as much about your identity
Right.
and where that takes you, kind of thing. And one of the things I love about Girl Warrior is you've got a whole riff on you had started doing outrigger canoe racing when you lived in Hawaii. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And you've got this great riff about how, you were getting into your own head during a race and you really just you knew you had to get out of your own way. And it's a great metaphor and it's a great image of you who really did come from a very landlocked place. Like the ocean is not a place where you
It's not near
discovered it
Oklahoma.
as a toddler, kind of thing, right? Like you came to it later in life. And that kind of openness and that willingness to play in what can be an uncomfortable space. I mean, I have done some rowing. It is not the easiest thing to put your body through.
No, no, and you get judged, and either people have done it their whole life.
Hmm.
Of course, I was in a beginner,
Hmm.
canoe, but still. The funny story is it was the first time I went down to practice. I was
Hmm.
introduced and all of that. And so I said, well, what do I do? And they said, and these were advanced paddlers, and they said,
Right.
well, just follow the person in front of you.
Oh,
So then we
okay.
were in the LOI practicing, and we were going along, and they put me in the front. They had put me in the front seat, because I
Oh,
have
okay.
I have a long reach. I've got long arms. And I went by my friends and they just cracked up laughing. But there was something, I loved the water there and the
Hmm.
ocean. It was a teacher. I think I said that in one book. It was one
Hmm.
of my most incredible teachers because I had experiences out there that were
Right.
sometimes a little scary. Well, like that
Hmm.
one race where that
Hmm.
one race was really kind of scary, but then
Hmm.
I came to understand how when you put yourself you're in a very challenging place,
Hmm.
and what helps is knowing we're all moving together. That
Right.
helps, just like now in these times. If we're moving together, there's something about making it through that challenge together
Hmm.
that just infuses the world with love and hopefulness.
And that's experience you can take with you wherever you are. It's
That's right.
that experience is not rooted to that place per se. You have a
Right.
great line in Girl Warrior where you say, "Our voices speak and sing our collective world into existence. Together, our voices assist in determining the rise and fall of history." And I love that idea that there's a collective, there is a we, there is an us. And sometimes it doesn't always feel that way, right? Especially in this kind of moment, right? But the idea, and whether that's a physical activity like the rowing, or, I mean, you've got so many examples. The kitchen tables, I will never get tired of hearing you tell the kitchen table story where as a child you and your cousins and siblings and cousins would hide under the table because you knew that's when the good stories came out.
Oh, yeah.
Like if the adults didn't think you were in the room. That to me is the kind of story field experience that you carry around, right? Like that goes with you into the outrigger canoe in Hawaii because you
It
know you're going to
does.
get a
Yeah.
story out of it.
Yeah, there's always a story. And you know what? That helps me. I think I put that in one of the stories in there. Is like,
Hmm.
if I know I'm in a really hard place,
Uh-huh.
like walking along the New Jersey Turnpike around at midnight or 1 in the morning,
Oh, that story
I
was
think
wild. That
I,
story
I
was
thought
wild.
I was walking along with I had my saxophone on my back and I had two bags, wheeling two bags, and I tell myself, well, this will make a good story.
Right.
That helps. And this, like I'm saying right now in this country, we're going to have an incredible.
Hmm.
We've got a crazy. It's You would not believe it if I turned in the story of what's going on right now to my editor.
Hmm.
My editor, they would say, "Oh, this is not possible."
Right.
Even if it was a satire. you know, yeah,
I
it would have a hard time. So that's what I think right now. It's like, okay, we have what an incredible story about how this is how I have to think about it because of the young people and because of the grandchildren is that what an incredible story we are in. So let's
mm-hmm.
see what my part is and our part in my community and what how incredibly we're going to keep our heads above water
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even if the
Mm-hmm.
canoe flips. And canoes
Right.
do flip.
Oh,
Everybody
yes, they
has
do.
a role. Yeah.
Yes,
Have
they
you
do.
have you been? Yeah, you've been.
I have a story about how my head ended up underwater and the rest of me was still in the canoe, courtesy of my
Oh
little
wow.
brother being
Yes.
a little brother. And yeah, it's a very funny story, but it's a long story, and it
Oh,
does. If you have a little brother, you understand these things happen. But really, my body was still in the canoe and my head was underwater. So
yeah. Yeah, I
these things
understand how
happen.
that can happen.
These things happen. But listening to you talk about how language captures the experience, and if you were to send a manuscript to your editor now, I mean, satire actually doesn't feel like a thing that works in this moment. I mean,
No.
it just, we can't. Imagination is a wonderful thing, and it's amazing, and it has given us incredible pieces of culture and society and art and but language now. I mean, it's so good at connecting us, and yet at the same time, it's like, do we have enough language to do what we're trying to do? I think is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And AI makes sense because,
Mm.
when I think about it a lot lately is
Mm-hmm.
thinking about when I grew up, I lived in a real world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what I call a real world. I mean, things are physical. There was physical.
Mm-hmm.
If you spoke to somebody. There was a phone, but you talked to people.
Right.
Hear, you could hear their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And with music, I mean, there was radio.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was limited in what you heard. Like now, what's cool, you can hear music from all over the world, and so on, and hear people that you wouldn't hear on the radio.
Right. Right.
But if generally you trusted what you heard,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
you can tell, it's easier to tell when somebody's lying.
Hmm.
If you're there in front of you, you can smell it, you know. You can smell it, but yeah, anyway, I mean, it was different in that way. And of course, politicians are always going to be politicians.
Mm.
So there's always layering of, you know, what do people want to hear versus what's really going. So that's always been part of the story. I mean, humans are
Right.
humans now and in the next century. Humans are humans. But what we're dealing with now is the unprecedented ability to lie for massive lies with images, with false moving images,
Hmm.
and what do you do? You know, it's we've never seen anything like this.
No, we haven't. Even sort of with CGI in movies, we've never seen this kind of media manipulation. But you also, in Girl Warrior, you're talking about how we can read voices like a book or
Yeah,
another kind of text. And for me, voice and language, obviously on the page,
right, right.
are, they are the thing I care about most. And I would argue actually language and voice are the same thing on the page. I think not
Yeah, yeah,
necessarily as we're in conversation, but the idea though that language will get us through, and that poetry, poetry, you talk about how it can be the disruptive thing that creates all sorts of new art and new sorts of worlds and what have you. But the idea that we can use language to get through the fear and the anxiety and the discomfort and the just not knowing,
hmm,
whatever that falls, whatever not knowing falls under, I guess that can be also part of anxiety, right? We live in a world where climate change is doing dramatic and drastic things
that's right.
to everyone.
Yeah.
Um, but when did you realize you'd found your voice? Because when I think of your voice, I mean, it changes with each of the arts that you are pursuing. I
Hmm.
mean, I love the idea that you're painting again after 50 years. But when I think about the difference between you as a musician and you as a prose stylist slash memoirist, and then the poet, I mean, they all feed each other, sure, but they don't sound exactly the same.
Huh. No, not exactly the same, but I think of it as the same voice. I mean,
Okay.
there's quality in my sax, or
Okay.
even when I play flute,
Mm-hmm.
or even when I sing
Mm-hmm.
that and speak, it's a similar tonality or quality. Resonance, I guess you might say a resonance or quality. And then when I write, I mean, you're hearing it in a different way because
Mm-hmm.
usually you're reading and you're hearing it through your own filter.
Right.
But there's still, I mean, you can read different. I'm looking at my bookcase. You can
Yeah.
read different. You can hear there, and it's like cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
I love comedy and cartoons and all of
Right.
that. And you can always tell with an artist, you can tell you can tell who they are.
Mm-hmm.
The spirit of who they are becomes. You can almost see what they look like
Mm-hmm.
by how they, by their art. There's something you can say. There's a reason we know this is so and so's painting and this is so and so's.
Right.
And I sat in a live drawing class the other day, something I hadn't done in 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it made me happy to look around and see how everybody is who they are.
Yeah.
You can have everybody looking at the same thing or the same moment in history, or in the family when you get kids sitting around,
Mm-hmm.
even grown, and there was something traumatic. Everybody has their own take on it.
It's
So
true.
there's something in art about voice, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
in art, or some kind of expression. You can have 50 horn players. Some of them will just sound bad, like students, but
Yeah.
there's a point, and I don't know when that is. There's a point when the voice is there. Like I had to get some teeth work done,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to play, and my voice had gone on my sax.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God, I thought I guess I'll have to learn to play guitar, which I'm learning anyway. But I thought, what happens? Because I am not going to play if
Okay.
my voice is gone. So then when I got the permanent, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I waited, I played, and it was even better.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was even better. But the same, I guess it goes through with writing too. There have been moments, and I think
Mm-hmm.
writers go through this. This is when I moved to Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
to Oahu, and it was like, where's my voice?
Yeah.
there was a period I think that I wasn't writing, that it was more difficult
Hmm.
to write because I wasn't, even though it was a place I think about every day and I miss the water and the people and all of that. Um, it was, my voice had to, it took a while,
Yeah.
because my voice is me wherever I am.
Hmm. Hmm.
But there was a shift that happened there.
Which brings me to something else you said in Girl Warrior. Like every moment in time is a point of origin. And that's exactly what you were just talking about, though, with, people in the same family can have a different version of events. Or, people in a classroom can have a different version of events, kind of thing. But everyone has a point of origin story for whatever story they're telling. And sometimes that story takes on sort of mythological implications, right? Like every family has its own mythology.
That's true.
Every family has
That's
its own
true.
mythology. And how you approach that is up to you. But tricksters, do you feel like all writers are tricksters? Do you think that's part of the role of the writer, or do you think tricksters are sort of separate, doing their own thing? Because I do love the concept of the trickster, and it does cross all kinds of genre and culture and society. I mean, tricksters are in every culture. They just might be called something different.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that every writer is, because it's a certain kind of mentality.
Okay.
And I keep thinking of a story from a poet friend of mine who used to teach at Naropa, who would talk about one of their teachers who would come in, a Buddhist teacher who was a trickster now. And he would do things that were sometimes shocking
Mm-hmm.
as a trickster. He was a
Right.
trickster teacher because he would do things to shock or to
Mm-hmm.
upend expectations, to shift people, even though it
Mm, yeah.
might be uncomfortable and even appear crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was done, or understood. Maybe it wasn't. It was done. It was deliberate. And I don't think everybody works that way, though writing in a way is a kind of manipulation. Or when you're
Mm-hmm.
writing, you write towards something. It's I would say it's your point of view, but it's not always. I mean, when
Mm-hmm.
I go into writing, I mean, poetry, not necessarily what I
Right.
read. Girl Warrior is different. That's a
Yep.
lot more linear and present, and it's not like writing a poem or writing music or a painting where you're dealing with the mythologies. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
mythologies become front and center, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't work there are trickster painters
Yeah.
and trickster horn players. I was trying to think of a good, what's his name? Sun Ra.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
For example, maybe. But it's, and some of us aren't that way. I mean, and the
Mm-hmm.
way I think about too artists, or maybe even everybody, is that some people work vertically in their
Mm-hmm.
in their story making, however it is. Maybe
Right.
it's fixing cars, but they work out of a classical tradition, and
Mm-hmm.
so they work, and it could be even out of a place, and then
Yep.
they work and develop that in a
Mm-hmm.
vertical manner. And other people like me wind up in Hawaii racing canoes, or in Townsville, Australia, marching in a parade with my canoe mates, carrying a paddle,
Mm-hmm.
singing Hawaiian songs behind the Hawaiian flag. That's working more horizontally, because I go out and experience, and it there's a relationship and what moves me to be there
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in the first place, and then it kind of becomes part of this larger, it's my story field shape,
Yeah.
perhaps, or the architecture of my part of the story field and the larger story
Mm-hmm.
field. That's just, we could say, personality or inclination or spirit. I mean, what I came in with and how it wanted to develop itself. Maybe it's doing its thing without even my
Yeah.
conscious knowledge.
Yep.
We don't know.
We don't know, but one of the things you point out too when you're talking about tricksters and Girl Warrior is that if it weren't for failure and if it weren't for bad decisions, and in fact, if it weren't for law breaking, we wouldn't have story. And I think it's kind of an important point to make, especially with younger people who've grown up native to social media. They're seeing images of a kind of perfection that has been sent
Oh
through
yeah.
filters and, you know, everything is framed perfectly kind of thing. And, you and I both came up sort of at separate moments, but without that. I'm one
Yeah.
of the last generations that suddenly, my brother and I also used to fight over the phone in the kitchen because
Yeah.
that's how it was, you know. And we finally, a computer did finally come home and things like that. So I'm that sort of pivot point where suddenly technology became a little more accessible and computers weren't just punch cards anymore that
Mhm.
someone's, mom and dad worked on in Boston kind of thing.
Right, right.
But to give younger people an idea that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to not be perfect. I mean, maybe not the law breaking part, but the rest of it, where it's like, figure out what it means to be a person in the world, but also there are people who have tried this before you and maybe listen to them too, because they probably learned some stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know that's totally different too, these perfect images. And
Right.
my husband and I crack up over our kids and grandkids. They will
Mm-hmm.
take a photograph, and if we're in it, we look like hell because they've done up their image.
Mm-hmm.
They make themselves look perfect, and then we look bedraggled. Yeah, yes, it's just funny, but it's funny. But I think about what it does to the psyche,
Mm-hmm.
especially young women.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah, that's exactly him.
yeah, as women, we've always gone through that in one way or the other. But for young women to, have to aspire to something that's not possible, I mean, that makes a few twists and turns in your psyche.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It really does. But I love the idea too that you turned off Reels and TikTok so that you wouldn't interfere with your dreaming.
Hmm.
And that to me, I'm like, oh, I would like to spend a little less time on social media myself. But,
I try.
um,
I get
right.
pulled into, but I found that because I realized that it was too
Hmm.
much in my consciousness
Right.
because my dreams, which I've always depended on in that kind of
Hmm.
space, were suddenly these short little snippets where nothing got developed.
Right.
And
Right.
so I've also started cutting back even more and reading more because I realized that my reading was being cut severely. I was not reading.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's, I reach out and get info. And I guess the argument there, well, I learn a lot. And there is a lot TikTok
Hmm.
has turned into my understanding. And I see now and then, it's been, it's used for, it becomes, for promotion.
Mm. Yeah,
And
it's one of the things that's out there in the world. I have very mixed feelings about a lot of things.
yeah,
I
yeah.
do. I mean, I find it incredibly helpful for me as a human to make sure that I make time to read every day. And yes, I'm a bookseller too, but I'm a human first. I'm a human being first.
Yeah.
And I really do, even if it's just a page or a paragraph or a poem or part of a
Mhm.
poem, because sometimes poems can be very, very epic.
Sure.
I need that to sort of get my head where I need it to be a person in the world.
Yeah.
And before I go to bed too, I need to sort of, also it doesn't help if you're staring at a backlit screen that just sets off bad things in your circadian rhythm. But um I need that language and I need that connection with either the person who's created whatever it is I'm reading
Yeah.
or other people that I know who are equally fond of whatever thing I've picked up. That sense of community, which is partially why I'm so excited about Girl Warrior too, is that the idea that we can build community
Hmm.
around this book and then
Oh,
get some of these young
interesting.
people
Yeah.
right to the poetry and to Poet Warrior and Crazy Brave, and then where does that take them from there? Maybe they go to Catching the Light, which is the book that you did with Yale University Press about
Hmm.
your creative process, which is a delight to read. It's very short. It's very
Yes.
tiny, but it's fun and it's very you. Um, and I would love to see some of these kids from who pick up Girl Warrior, and I shouldn't just say kids; it will be young people across a wide range. But to see them discover you in a different way in Catching the Light, which is also just a really pretty paperback. Can we just look at how pretty this book is for a second? It's so little and tiny and perfect.
Yeah, you know what that came out of is that
Mm-hmm.
I had to write a speech, and they say
Uh,
part of the deal for that speech, you had to put it as, add to it and make a little
mm-hmm.
book. And I thought, well, I'm going to do the book first. And I was thinking about the 50 years since I first published a
Right.
poem. And that's so I wrote 50 vignettes. I like writing in that small
Hmm.
vignette, small lyrical
Yep.
essay, kind of flash fiction kind of mode, you know.
And I really like reading it. So it works for both of us. But I love the idea too that healing is part of why you write poetry, that when you discovered that you could use language in a way to help yourself heal. And I don't necessarily mean that in a literal sense, but you clearly get more from the work at lots of different levels. From
Yeah, yeah.
and it starts with the poetry. So I do want to come back to this for a second because I'm really hoping that we can get lots of young people reading all kinds of poetry because I do think there's something to be said for how language rolls out in a poem.
So what happened and why I got one reason with the poetry,
Mm-hmm.
it was like now I realize it in retrospect, but when I look back at the process. But there were native writers coming up, a lot of them male, and people weren't really, and I thought about the community as a young native woman I was in with the Kiva Club with our native student group and so on. And I thought, you know, nobody's really speaking out of there isn't really so I like the idea of community, what you were saying about community, because that's why my poetry came about. It
Right.
wasn't, well, I'm going to do this because I need to get through this stuff. I had no idea it was going to get me through stuff, but I was looking around at our community
Mm-hmm.
and thinking, wow, there's no, and I just started, that's what I did, that's what kind of provoked me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started writing because I had heard all of these male voices,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't hearing other voices.
Right.
And that on a certain level, sometimes it wasn't even all conscious, but I was so involved in
Mm-hmm.
that struggle, so to speak, and the struggle of being a young woman
Right.
with two small children and going to school and working and all of that, and then these speeches by males, they
Mm.
wouldn't put women up, speeches about males about what we need to do and how we're going to do it. And then here we
Mm-hmm.
were at home pulling it all together and
Yeah.
taking care of business. And
So much. There's a great line in Catching the Light where you say, one of the rules of writing that stands throughout time, do not be complacent, take risks, and most important, listen. And listening is something that comes up in all of your books, and you talk about it in a poetic context, in prose context. And I love this emphasis on listening and catching the musicality of the ideas and the words, but also the experience and the history and all like this idea of listening driving you, and how you then put it all together in the work. I don't think it's just because of the musicianship. I mean,
no,
I think
no,
it's bigger than that.
yeah, I think it's bigger. A lot of it could be even contemplation, because
Yeah.
I was talking with somebody about the difference with painting. And what the painting I did is much more, it's different than anything I did 50
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And instead of course, then I was mostly painting and I had to get stuff done for
Mm-hmm.
classes, grades, etc. But this painting took me almost 2 months.
Wow. Okay.
And that's because I would stop and think. I would sit there and then I might do something and then I might say, nope, I'll look at it. I stand back and look at it and then I do something over it. But I use what I did as a jumping off point, even though I might wash
Mm-hmm.
over it. It's given me the place. But that's listening. I
Yeah.
realize that even though I might be working with paint,
Mm-hmm.
it's obvious with music and even poetry, because
Yep.
poetry is a sound art, and you're looking for a lot of the same things in music, for silent spaces and pauses and movement and sound quality and tonal quality and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But even doing another kind of art, or even living your life, you know, even learning plants or
Mm-hmm.
going outside. It's like a lot of this painting has yellow, and I was never a person that used a lot of yellow. But then I realized that my walks around the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
this summer, there was this group of yellow flowers, and I loved them. And I would go by and I started hearing yellow. I began to hear what yellow sounded like. And that was from just listening. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't put my phone on, I wouldn't put music. I
Mm-hmm.
would just go out and walk and watch and listen. And then that's when I started hearing yellow. And I would always look forward to seeing them. And
Mm-hmm.
now that it's fall, they took those flowers out and put these other flowers in that I don't, they're nice, but we talk about resonances.
It's not doing it.
Not the same thing, and they're great and they're fine, but I miss it was those yellow flowers really hooked in and taught me something. But
I
that
love
was,
the idea
yeah.
that you're listening to what's around you. I mean, I spend a lot of time in cities, and cities, have their own rhythm and their own patterns, and I will say that I notice the silence more when I'm in a city than I do when I'm in the desert or out in the country standing under a tree somewhere. I think I make assumptions about what places outside of a city sound like, and I'm more surprised when there's noise than when there isn't noise. Whereas in the city, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm not. There isn't any. There's no traffic. There's no garbage pickup. It is absolutely
Mhm.
delightfully quiet, and that does give you space to be in a city in a different way.
Yeah, that's true, and it can be really noisy.
Yeah. Oh, it can, but it suddenly has gotten very quiet in my corner where I am, and I'm just like, oh wow, there is. Okay, what is going on?
Yeah.
How did that happen? So you have a new album coming.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering though, are there maybe some new poems? Is there, I mean, Girl Warrior is here now, which is delightful, but it is also, I'm holding a galley, but
Check that
um,
cover out. That cover is
I
amazing.
love that all of it. I mean, you always have great jackets on all of your jackets are fantastic, but it's very slim. It's very
Yeah,
slim.
they got a silver that it's got.
Oh, I'm so excited for that to be out in the world. That is just beautiful.
Yes, I have a book of poetry that's scheduled to come out next fall called Cloud Runner.
Oh, beautiful. I love that title. I cannot wait to read that. So, Joy, before I let you go, though, we keep dipping in and around poetry, obviously, because that is really your home is poetry. Um, but I've always kind of insisted that more people could benefit from dipping into a little bit of poetry. And I do think folks do get intimidated. There's this idea that it's a very formal, stuffy, in some ways, art. And I don't know. I would like to open the door for more people to come to poetry. And I really do think Girl Warrior and certainly Crazy Brave and Poet Warrior help with that. But I'm just wondering how you feel we can maybe bring some more folks to the art itself.
I mean, if you listen to a song, I'm not all songs, not all song lyrics are poetry.
Right. That's true. No, that's true.
But there are some excellent poets with songwriting. But when you listen to a song, it's the same thing. I mean, you look at a poem, you see the title, you might know the title, but you don't go to a song and say, okay, wait, I need to know the structure. What is the song
Hmm.
structure here? Is it A, B, A? I have to know all of
Right.
these things before I can correctly read this. And maybe I'm not getting it right. Who's going to get Hotel California
Hmm.
right? A lot of these songs. I mean, there's embedded mythologies and so on, and personal mythologies in I think the best of the writers. So if you were to come at it like you do a song and just enjoy it for the even the complexity, it's play. A lot of that is playing with sounds and just like a song and metaphor and images. And if you approach it like that first, you're going to get, I wouldn't worry about what, you just listen and you take it in. It's like, oh, that's cool. And then listen to it again. I mean, you listen to songs over and over. And there are some songs that will catch you right away and they become part of your song list that you go to, and others, it's the same with anything else. But I think that's where people get intimidated or they
Mm.
associate it with academia.
Right.
And there's poetry, we heard with rap, with a lot of music forms and
Hmm.
and, and oratory
Yep.
and cool oratory that it's, it's an innate part of us. It's like
Yeah.
soul talk.
Well, we can also follow your lead and we can listen. I mean, that is the thing that I need to hold tight to after this conversation, is just listening in all of the different levels, right? And just being able to sit with whatever sound I'm hearing or not hearing. Joy Harjo, thank you so much for joining us on Poured Over. Girl Warrior is out now. And if you haven't experienced the poetry, well, guess what? There are 9 collections with a 10th on the way. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed this moment to get to visit with you about Girl Warrior. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.